Who is the greatest competitive Pokemon of all time? The answer is not as cut and dry as you would think. There are many ways you can look at this question and quite a few contenders. The most popular, and one that you probably thought of immediately, is Landorus-Therian. Ever since its release, this Pokemon has been incredible in both competitive singles and doubles. It always has a very high usage, and even its recent severe nerfs in Gen 9 have not kept it down that much. Tyranitar is another popular contender. While it has fallen down to UU in Generation 9, Tyranitar probably has the most impressive career in Pokemon history overall, debuting in Gen 2 to instant competitive success, arguably being the #1 Pokemon in the game in Gens 3, 4, and 5, and maintaining an OU status in every single game since then, only dropping off very recently in Gen 9. There's also Zapdos, who is without a doubt the most consistent competitive Pokemon of all time, debuting all the way back in Generation 1 where it was fantastic, and amazingly maintaining OU status even to this day in Generation 9. There's also Pokemon like Dragonite, Clefable, and Gliscor who have incredible showings throughout the years as well. But what about Ferrothorn? Whenever this conversation comes up, I never see people talk about Ferrothorn. Maybe because it's a little boring or unexciting compared to the other contenders. But this is one of those Pokemon that I think is so fundamentally good that I can't see it ever falling off or fading into irrelevance. The only reason it's not seen in Gen 9 is because they didn't put it into the game. Ferrothorn debuted in Generation 5, and to this day it's one of the top Pokemon in that format. Quite a few of the top tier Pokemon that defined Generation 5's metagame have fallen off in the modern day, but Ferrothorn never did. This Pokemon is incredible in every single generation it's available. Ferrothorn is also very consistently good in Ubers formats, a tier where legendaries are legal, as Ferrothorn matches up well against popular choices like Kyogre and Xerneas. Is this the greatest competitive Pokemon of all time? I think it's certainly a contender, and of all the Pokemon in the conversation, I think this one is perhaps the most underrated. Let's talk about why Ferrothorn is so excellent, and its solid case for being the greatest to ever do it. Ferrothorn debuted in Generation 5, where it is without a doubt a top tier. Ferrothorn immediately stole away the jobs of many hazard-setting defensive Pokemon that had been at the top of their category for years. While Skarmory and Forretress were still used in Gen 5, Ferrothorn was used much more often. Ferrothorn's incredible defensive stats, inbuilt Rocky Helmet effect with the ability Iron Barbs, and tremendous utility move pool make it perhaps the easiest Pokemon to just throw on a team in Gen 5. This Pokemon is an asset to absolutely every single playstyle in the game. Grass Steel typing is fantastic with so many great resistances and immunities, and only 2 weaknesses to Fighting and Fire, which are fairly easy to cover with teammates. Gen 5 is fast paced, and you'd think a defensive Pokemon like this would struggle to keep up with that pace, but with the inherent passive damage from Iron Barbs, the hard-hitting Gyro Ball and Power Whip as stab attacks, and so many useful miscellaneous utility moves that make a noteworthy impact on the game like Knockoff, Thunder Wave, or Leech Seed. Ferrothorn isn't just keeping up with the pace, it's thriving. Iron Barbs also feels perfect on a hazard-setting Pokemon like this because it punishes Rapid Spin. If the enemy tries to Rapid Spin and remove your hazards, they'll be dealing chip damage to themselves. Ferrothorn can repeatedly reset hazards onto the field and 1v1 any Rapid Spinner as they slowly perish in front of it. Ferrothorn's defensive typing is a great fit in this metagame, as dragons are more powerful than ever before, and dragon resistance feels imperative. Ferrothorn is an incredible line of defense against anything that wants to click Outrage. Water resistance is also feeling very important in this world full of permanent rain teams. Ferrothorn happens to fit very well on rain teams itself, since rain reduces fire type damage, patching up a significant ×4 weakness. Sand is the other popular weather effect, and Ferrothorn is completely immune to sandstorm damage. Water resistance and neutrality to the common ice coverage held on water types also makes Ferrothorn feel a lot better than counterparts like Skarmory and Forretress most of the time, since water resistance is very important here. In later generations, although dragon types felt less powerful and prevalent with the introduction of fairy type to the game, Ferrothorn's Grass Steel typing still felt excellent. It helped that Ferrothorn was pretty nice against the all-new fairy types thanks to its resistance and super effective Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball is more powerful the slower you are than your target, which is perfect for Ferrothorn, who has very, very low speed. With the minimum speed possible from minimum IVs and a negative nature, Ferrothorn can impressively one-hit KO Pokemon like Mega Gardevoir and significantly threaten Clefable and Sylveon. Excadrill was popular back in Gen 5, and Ferrothorn was very effective at 1v1ing it in Hazard Wars, as Excadrill's Rapid Spin felt useless in the face of Ferrothorn's Iron Barbs. In Gen 6, Excadrill is even more common and central, and the #1 Rapid Spinner, so Ferrothorn is absolutely loving that. Thunder Wave was a popular choice on Ferrothorn back in Gen 5 because it's so great at crippling common switch-ins, especially fire-type threats like Heatran. This is even more true in Generation 6 with Pokemon like the Mega Charizards, or fighting-type threats like Mega Lopunny and Mega Metachan that get completely destroyed by paralysis. The incredible defensive value and utility Ferrothorn provides seems to just maintain its excellence in every single generation, no matter the shifting meta around it. In Gen 7, the central threats look completely different, but Ferrothorn manages to hold its own. Pokemon like Tapu Koko, Ash, Greninja, and Tapu Lele all kind of struggle against Ferrothorn, a little bit at least. They may have some coverage for it, but choice-locked sets will be punished for choosing any type that Ferrothorn resists. It's always difficult to one-shot Ferrothorn, and Ferrothorn can strike back very well with Gyro Ball, especially against faster enemies. And anything clicking U-turn or Outrage or random contact moves are just scared of Iron Barbs at all times. And Ferrothorn can always punish its switch-in significantly with those great utility moves like Knock Off and Thunder Wave. Something I haven't even talked about yet is the item variety possible on Ferrothorn. It can take advantage of many different type resist berries like Chople Berry or Ochre Berry to just live one significant hit and either strike back or make hazards or paralyze whatever's in front of it. Rocky Helmet is popular to stack contact damage even further, as Iron Barbs and Rocky Helmet will activate if anything makes contact with Ferrothorn. Healing Berries also give Ferrothorn a little bit of short-term longevity. Citrus Berry and Iapapa Berry and Lumberry can of course heal you from a single status ailment. Ferrothorn's item slot feels so flexible because it doesn't even need an item really to function well defensively. The item slot can serve to give it one extra turn, which can be game winning, help it check one extra thing, or just play to its strengths further like with Rocky Helmet. In Generation 8, Ferrothorn actually got a really significant buff, access to a new move called Body Press. Body Press is an 80 power fighting type attack that uses defense to calculate its damage instead of attack. Ferrothorn's defense stat is much higher than its attack stat, so this hits really hard, and it's useful coverage against common dark types like Weavile or Bisharp. And what's even better for Ferrothorn in this generation is that Hidden Power no longer exists. It was completely removed. Hidden Power is a move that existed before Gen 8 that can change its type depending on your Pokemon's IV values, so it can just be used as a generic universal coverage move. Hidden Power Fire was a common option to hit steel types, especially Ferrothorn, for ×4 super effective damage. Now that Ferrothorn is no longer worried about any Pokemon being able to have fire coverage, it is way better defensively. And it looks like Hidden Power is never coming back, so this advantage would still ring true in modern times. Ferrothorn helping out against the Tapu Pokemon was still an asset in Generation 8, as these Pokemon are still here and are still central. But new Pokemon that have risen up to the forefront, like Weavile, who is much more common in Gen 8, and the all-new Melmetal, also hate seeing Ferrothorn because of its contact damage and its great resistances. In every single generation of Ubers, it feels like Ferrothorn is one of the better non-Uber Pokemon to use in the format. Even among the most powerful legendaries in the game, nothing can quite be an all-in-one package of defense and utility like Ferrothorn. And its typing matches up well against popular legendaries such as Kyogre. You do resist water, you're neutral to ice, and resist electric, so that covers all of Kyogre's coverage options. You also threaten Kyogre directly with Power Whip, and you can progress your game plan whenever you switch in against Kyogre by making hazards or knocking off an item or something. Dragon types are everywhere in Ubers, and of course dragon resistance plus that contact damage is going to punish all of them. Although Xerneas can run coverage like Focus Blast and Hidden Power Fire, with a Chople or Ochre Berry on your side, you can act as a Xerneas check, as Gyro Ball will hit them super effectively and deal significant damage due to the speed disparity. Ferrothorn's great natural bulk in both defensive stats also just allow it to live many different powerful neutral hits and spread status, knock off important items, or get hazards up. against various legendaries. Doesn't matter who you are. Ferrothorn does not exist in Gen 9, but there is a format called National Dex, which is a Gen 9 format with all of the previously cut content still in the game. This includes cut Pokemon, cut mechanics like Z-moves and Mega, and cut moveset options. So in National Dex, Ferrothorn is existing among all of the new Gen 9 threats. It's existing among hidden power, Z-moves, everything. And it's still amazing. Surprise, surprise. Ferrothorn is still a great Pokemon in National Dex. Even though there's significant competition from new hazard-setting Pokemon, like Tinglu and Glamora, Ferrothorn is still the king. Great Tusk is a significant adversary for Ferrothorn, as it is a rapid spinner that can actually threaten Ferrothorn pretty well with close combat, but even they are frightened of a Choppleberry Power Whip situation, which would leave them deceased. In National Dex, Terastallization is actually banned, but imagine Ferrothorn with the ability to Terastallize. One extra tool up its sleeve to get an extra turn in there, or just give it the longevity it's always wanted. Terra Water or Terra Fairy would be excellent on Ferrothorn, allowing it to cover its resistances and do something great for the free turn it gains. So would I consider Ferrothorn to be the greatest Pokemon? I do think it has a really strong case based on everything I've said here, and I think I give Ferrothorn some bonus points because it hasn't changed that much from its original state. A lot of Pokemon that are considered GOATs get help over the years. They get buffs or mechanical changes that benefit them. Ferrothorn is mostly just fundamentally strong in concept ever since its inception. And it just seems to be amazing at what it does no matter what the metagame around it looks like. Even in Uber's formats, that's true. I would also give Ferrothorn bonus points for its Uber's viability. Landorus-Therian, by comparison, is not as good in Ubers as Ferrothorn is. In a vacuum, you could say that Ferrothorn is just so good that it will always be competitively viable. And maybe under certain definitions, that is enough to call it the GOAT. I don't know if I would personally call Ferrothorn the absolute best, though. I'm inclined to give that title to Zapdos, who has maintained OU viability for genuinely over 20 years. I think that that is kind of unreal. Tyranitar has the highest peaks. Landorus-Therian also has high peaks and very good consistency. And maybe Ferrothorn's strength is its sheer fundamental power for what it does, for its defensive utility, and its value in Uber's formats. If you called Ferrothorn the greatest Pokemon of all time, I wouldn't blame. And I think it is a very strong contender. But I think a more important question is actually, do I like Ferrothorn? Is Ferrothorn being so good a positive thing for the metagames it's present in? That's a more complicated question. And I have to be honest, the lack of Ferrothorn in Generation 9 has been kind of nice. Ferrothorn is this omnipresent central defensive Pokemon in every single generation it exists in, and not having to deal with Ferrothorn for once is kind of cool. New Pokemon have taken the spotlight as hazard setters and defensive steel types and what have you. It does actually feel like there's more variety going on in that role because Ferrothorn tends to homogenize everything into one little package. But that being said, I mean, Ferrothorn itself is not that bad as a defensive Pokemon. It feels fairly balanced. It's kind of nice to punish contact moves and have such a consistent utility guy to throw onto teams. So overall, I think Ferrothorn is usually a positive presence. It's an easy Pokemon to get annoyed by because it represents so much value and you can't attack into it very well and it walls so many things. And it can be kind of annoying to take down. I think in Generation 8 this is especially true because Hidden Power no longer exists for that universal coverage, so you can't even target it with Hidden Power Fire. For that reason, Ferrothorn more commonly runs Rocky Helmet. That was already a common item on it, but now it's not as worried about that fire coverage, doesn't need the Ochre Berry as much, and I don't care who you are, Rocky Helmet Ferrothorn is an annoying Pokemon. Something that also frustrates me about Ferrothorn is that a lot of the time Focus Blast is the best coverage option in a Pokemon's moveset to hit Ferrothorn because of the fighting weakness, and Focus Blast is an inherently unreliable move that I don't love being forced to run, but Ferrothorn is a Pokemon that often forces you to run Focus Blast to be able to hit it at all, so that can be a bit frustrating. If Ferrothorn existed in Gen 9, there would be some positive to it, because it would answer Ogerpon Wellspring very well, who is kind of a menace right now. Ferrothorn would completely destroy this Pokemon, in fact, but there would be some drawbacks too. Ferrothorn would maybe be at its most powerful, with the ability to Terastallize defensively. Body Press to hit all of the new threats. Iron Barb's Rocky Helmet would also be great here. Maybe Ferrothorn not being in the game anymore is actually because it would be too good. Perhaps this is a blessing after all. What do you think about Ferrothorn? Do you like it? Do you hate it? And who is your pick for the greatest Pokemon of all time? I think it's between Zapdos or Tyranitar, but there are many valid answers to the question, including Ferrothorn. Thank you for watching.